Hey everyone! Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this peach-faced Lovebird plush out of fuzzy socks. This is part of my Fuzzy Sock Bird plush series, where I make different species of birds into sock plushies. I'll link the playlist down below. So let's get started! To make the plush, you're going to need a green sock and a small section of a pink one. The rest of the supplies will be listed in the description box. First, cut your green sock right below the heel, making sure to save the excess sock for later use. Your piece should be about this large. Then take several large balls of stuffing and stuff the sock. Add an extra bit where you want the tail to be. The shape of your sock should look something like this. Next, we're going to thread the needle. If this is your first fuzzy sock plush, I highly recommend checking out my guide to working with fuzzy socks, linked in the iCard as well as in the description box. Close the gap in the sock with a running stitch. Make sure to poke in all the ends before you secure it closed with a couple of stitches. Then tie a couple slip knots and hide the end in the plush. Next, I'm going to cut a piece of pink sock fabric for the face. I just cut out a large piece, then trimmed it to the right size. Keep in mind that as you whip stitch it on, it'll fray a tiny bit and become smaller than its original size. To prevent this from happening as much as possible, try to handle it as little as you can. This piece is pretty large, so a tiny bit of fraying won't make as big of a difference as it would on a smaller piece. Again, once you finish sewing it on, tie a couple slip knots and hide the end. Next, we're going to make the wings. Using a marker, draw two wing shapes on some scrap green sock. Then backstitch a little over 3/4 of the wing you drew so that there's a gap about an inch wide to turn them inside out. Tie a couple knots and cut the thread. Once you cut the wing out, turn it inside out using the gap you left earlier. Stuff the raw ends inside the wing and sew it closed. Using the same thread you used to close it, sew it onto the body and repeat for the other wing. completely optional, but I'm going to add 2 indents where I want the eyes to be by making 2 small stitches, pulling it tight, and tying a couple knots. Next, I'm going to needle felt the beak. Fold a piece of tan wool in half, then in half again, and begin felting. Fold it over on itself several times, and begin felting 3 of the sides to sculpt it into a triangular shape. If you don't know how to needle felt, feel free to substitute in any other method. For example, you could sew on a piece of felt or craft foam instead, or make it out of polymer clay, leaving small holes in it to sew it on, kind of like a homemade bead. I always leave a list of substitutions as well as a lot of other useful information in the description box, so if you're interested in making this plush yourself, feel free to check it out. Once I was happy with the shape of the beak, I sewed that onto the face. Finally, I superglued on 2 flat-backed eyes. If you don't have these, you can also use beads or tie knots with black embroidery thread. And with that, we're finished. As I mentioned earlier, the playlist to the rest of the plushies in this series will be linked in the description box below. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe for more fuzzy sock plushies, crochet tutorials, and whatever other crafts I feel like doing. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.